It was a bright morning in Delhi, with the sun rising over the city and casting golden hues on the historic monuments scattered across the capital. The air was crisp and the usual hustle and bustle of daily life had already begun to take shape. Street vendors were setting up their stalls near busy intersections, chaiwalas were calling out to passers-by, and the distant honking of vehicles marked the start of another ordinary day in India's capital. Among the bustling crowd, tourists were making their way towards the Red Fort, one of India's most iconic landmarks, known not only for its stunning Mughal architecture but also for its historical significance in India's struggle for freedom. Families, schoolchildren, and foreign travelers moved along the pathways leading to the fort, some taking selfies, others simply admiring the massive red sandstone walls that had witnessed centuries of history. Security personnel were already stationed around the fort, scanning the crowd with sharp eyes. Metal detectors were positioned at entrances, and guards patrolled with rifles, keeping a vigilant watch for any suspicious activity. Everything seemed normal, almost like any other day, until the tranquility was shattered by a deafening explosion. At around 9:30 in the morning, a loud blast echoed near the main gate of the Red Fort. The sound was so powerful that it seemed to shake the very walls of the monument. People froze in shock, unsure of what had happened. Moments later, a cloud of smoke and dust rose into the sky, spreading quickly and obscuring the view of the fort. Panic erupted almost instantly. Tourists screamed and ran in all directions, some tripping over uneven pavements, others leaving their belongings behind in the chaos. Parents clutched their children tightly, frantically trying to move them to safety. Street vendors abandoned their carts, and vehicles came to a sudden halt as drivers tried to comprehend the scene unfolding in front of them. Security forces reacted immediately, though the scene was chaotic. Officers shouted commands, forming lines to control the crowd while others approached the blast site cautiously. Emergency sirens began to wail in the distance as ambulances and fire trucks rushed towards the area. Smoke mixed with the dust, making it difficult for people to breathe, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of burning material. Despite the fear and confusion, the first responders worked tirelessly, helping people move to safe zones, administering first aid, and trying to understand the magnitude of the incident. Within minutes, news agencies and journalists arrived on the scene, capturing footage and live updates. Social media platforms exploded with videos, pictures, and eyewitness accounts. People shared everything from shaky phone recordings of the moment of the blast to images of injured individuals being carried away on stretchers. The city of Delhi, known for its vibrant energy, was now gripped by shock and fear. Speculation ran rampant. Some claimed it was a gas cylinder accident, others suspected a terror attack, and many were unsure what to believe. The uncertainty only added to the tension. Amid this chaos, the Delhi police cordoned off the area, blocking all entrances and exits to prevent further incidents. Bomb disposal squads arrived to examine the site meticulously, looking for evidence of explosives or any remaining threat. Teams of forensic experts began documenting everything, from fragments of debris to traces of chemical residues, each piece potentially holding clues about what had caused the explosion and who might have been behind it. Meanwhile, emergency medical services worked round the clock to treat the injured, setting up temporary medical tents near the fort to handle the surge of casualties. As the dust slowly began to settle, people cautiously returned to the streets, though the air was heavy with fear and suspicion. The blast had left both physical and psychological scars, and the city was trying to regain a sense of normalcy. In homes across Delhi, families huddled around televisions and smartphones, desperate for answers. News anchors speculated endlessly, experts gave their opinions, and social media users debated theories. In this sea of information and misinformation, clarity was hard to find. It was in this environment of confusion that Dhruv Rathi, a well-known investigative content creator, decided to delve deeper into the incident. While mainstream media focused largely on visuals and immediate casualty reports, Dhruv wanted to explore the bigger picture, the background of the attack, the patterns, and the potential masterminds behind it. He began by analyzing official police statements, eyewitness accounts, and surveillance footage from nearby cameras. Slowly, a pattern started to emerge. The blast did not seem random. The location, timing, and the method suggested careful planning. It was meant to create fear and chaos, striking at the very heart of the nation's capital and at one of its most historically significant landmarks. Dhruv's research took him through layers of data. He compared the Red Fort incident with previous attacks on national monuments and high-profile events across India. He observed similarities in timing, strategy, and the way information, or misinformation, was disseminated to the public immediately after such attacks. There was a calculated element designed to maximize confusion and capture the public's attention. Videos he analyzed showed small, almost unnoticed signs leading up to the blast, suspicious individuals near the gate, unattended bags, and minor security lapses. Each detail, he realized, was a piece of a larger puzzle, hinting at a level of organization that went beyond a lone perpetrator. Through interviews with security experts, former intelligence officers, and on-ground journalists, Druv began piecing together the human element behind the attack. He learned about the challenges faced by security forces in managing high-profile sites like the Red Fort, including gaps in coordination between local police and central intelligence agencies, the limits of surveillance coverage, and vulnerabilities in crowd management during peak tourist hours. He discovered that while the immediate response had been swift, systemic issues had allowed the attackers to exploit the situation to some extent. Even as the public focused on images of the blast and the immediate aftermath, Druv's investigation revealed the deeper reality. The Red Fort blast was more than a violent incident, it was a message, a symbolic strike meant to instill fear, challenge authority, and make headlines worldwide. The attackers had chosen a location rich in historical and political significance, understanding that an explosion there would reverberate far beyond the physical damage it caused. Each fragment of debris, each cloud of smoke, each panicked scream was part of the narrative the perpetrators wanted to craft. By the end of the first day, the Red Fort, though scarred, still stood as a symbol of India's resilience. But the questions remained: who was behind the blast, what were their motives, and how could such attacks be prevented in the future? As Delhi slowly tried to regain its rhythm, the story of the Red Fort blast was only beginning to unfold. For Dhruv Rathi and his audience, it was clear that this incident required careful examination, beyond the sensational headlines, to uncover the truth behind the terror, the planning, and the people orchestrating it from behind the scenes. The morning's explosion had left the city shaken, but it also ignited a search for answers, a pursuit of reality, facts, and clarity that will wait LD continue in the days and weeks ahead. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, and every unexplored lead became crucial in understanding not just what had happened, but why it had happened, and who had the audacity to strike at the very heart of India's history and identity. As the immediate chaos of the Red Fort blast subsided, Dhruv Rathi began a meticulous investigation into the events that had unfolded. Unlike the sensationalized coverage in the media, his focus was on uncovering the deeper layers of the incident, the planning, the perpetrators, and the motivations behind such a brazen attack. He started by reviewing police reports and official statements released after the blast. The authorities had arrested a few individuals who were found near the site with suspicious items, but these arrests seemed only to scratch the surface. Dhruv realized that these individuals were likely small operatives, pawns in a much larger, more organized scheme. The masterminds, he suspected, were operating from behind the scenes, possibly even from outside India, using local networks to execute their plans. Dhruv turned to experts in national security and counter-terrorism. Former intelligence officers shared that attacks on symbolic landmarks were often designed to achieve multiple objectives. They were not just physical strikes, they were psychological operations intended to spread fear, gain attention, and disrupt public confidence in the government. According to these experts, the Red Fort blast bore several hallmarks of such an operation. The location was symbolic, the timing was strategic, and the method of attack suggested careful planning rather than a spontaneous act of violence. One key point that emerged from the investigation was the use of local operatives with foreign guidance. Intelligence agencies, Dhruv noted, had previously intercepted communications indicating the existence of sleeper cells in various Indian cities. These cells were small, often composed of individuals who appeared ordinary in their daily lives but could be mobilized quickly for violent actions. The Red Fort incident seemed to fit this pattern. Small-scale operatives carried out the immediate action, but the strategic direction likely came from an external source, providing instructions, resources, and perhaps even training. As Dhruv delved deeper, he explored the historical context of attacks on national monuments in India. Over the past decades, extremists had repeatedly targeted high-profile landmarks to create panic and gain media attention. Each incident followed a similar pattern: symbolic target, coordinated execution, and maximum visibility. What made the Red Fort blast unique, however, was the combination of timing and precision. It coincided with a national event, ensuring maximum attention both domestically and internationally. The planners, Druve concluded, had a sophisticated understanding of public perception and media cycles. Interviewing on-ground journalists who were present during the blast, Druve gathered first-hand accounts of the moments before and after the explosion. Witnesses described seeing individuals acting suspiciously near the main gate, leaving unattended bags, and then disappearing into the crowd. Some recalled noticing minor security lapses, such as insufficient patrolling in certain areas and delays in scanning specific visitors. These seemingly small details, Druve noted, pointed to vulnerabilities that the attackers had exploited. They had likely conducted prior surveillance, identifying weak points and planning their movements to avoid immediate detection. Druve also examined forensic evidence released by the police. The fragments collected at the blast site indicated the use of improvised explosive devices with limited but precise destructive capacity. This suggested that the attackers were not seeking mass casualties but rather aimed to create fear and disruption. The controlled nature of the blast implied knowledge of explosives and the ability to calculate effects carefully, further supporting the idea of professional guidance behind the operation. Beyond the physical and tactical aspects, Druve explored the ideological motives. Experts suggested that the blast carried symbolic significance, possibly intended to undermine public trust in the state's ability to protect its citizens and its heritage. By targeting a national symbol like the Red Fort, the attackers aimed to generate headlines, fuel anxiety, and amplify their message far beyond the immediate location. Druve emphasized that understanding these motives was crucial, as it revealed not just who carried out the attack, but why they chose this particular site, method, and timing. As his investigation continued, Druve began connecting the dots between local operatives and global extremist networks. He analyzed communication patterns, financial transactions, and past incidents in other countries that mirrored the Red Fort attack in method and intent. The picture that emerged was of a small but organized group, ideologically motivated and strategically networked, capable of manipulating local resources to achieve broader objectives. These were not isolated criminals, they were part of a larger system, often invisible to the public eye, but deeply embedded in networks that spanned borders. Druve also scrutinized the response of security agencies. While the police and emergency services acted quickly, there were noticeable gaps in coordination and preparedness for such attacks. Intelligence sharing between local and central agencies appeared to be insufficient, and surveillance measures around high-profile sites were not always comprehensive. Experts interviewed by Druve highlighted that these gaps were often exploited by planners of such attacks, who studied security protocols meticulously before executing their operations. The Red Fort incident, therefore, became a case study in both the ingenuity of attackers and the vulnerabilities within existing security systems. Throughout the investigation, Druve remained focused on facts and verified sources, avoiding speculation. He pieced together a narrative that balanced immediate events with strategic insights. The arrests made by the police were only the beginning. The real challenge lay in tracing the external guidance and uncovering the broader network behind the attack. He explained that while small operatives might be captured, the masterminds could remain hidden, influencing events from afar and exploiting legal and technological gaps to evade capture. In the final analysis, Druve concluded that the Red Fort blast was a carefully orchestrated act designed to achieve multiple goals: instill fear, gain visibility, and challenge the state's authority. The perpetrators combined local knowledge with external guidance, exploited security lapses, and chose a symbolic location to maximize impact. While the immediate response contained the situation, the deeper story revealed systemic vulnerabilities, ideological motives, and the presence of sophisticated networks operating in the shadows. Druve ended his report by stressing the importance of understanding not just the blast itself, but the larger context in which it occurred. The investigation highlighted the need for improved security protocols, better intelligence coordination, and increased public awareness. It also served as a reminder that behind every act of terror, there is often a complex web of planning, strategy, and ideology that must be understood to prevent future incidents. For Druve and his viewers, the Red Fort blast was more than a headline. It was a call to uncover the truth, question assumptions, and recognize the reality of modern security challenges in an interconnected world. By the time Druve wrapped up his analysis, the city of Delhi was slowly returning to its rhythm, yet the memory of the blast lingered. Citizens, officials, and security agencies were all left to reflect on the incident, not only in terms of damage and casualties but in terms of lessons learned, vulnerabilities exposed, and the invisible hands that could orchestrate such events from behind the scenes. The story of the Red Fort blast, he concluded, was far from over. It was a reminder that understanding the perpetrators and their motives was as crucial as preventing future attacks, and that only through careful investigation, vigilance, and systemic improvement could such tragedies be mitigated.